Welcome to this episode of EdTech People with your host, myself, Matthew Setchell. EdTech People is all about the past, present and future of educational technology. The podcast meets with some really great guests. So sit back, relax and enjoy this episode. You can also check out our past episodes by subscribing. You can watch us on YouTube now as well. So feel free to visit our website at edtechpeople.co.uk to find out about us and what we do. Welcome to another episode of EdTech People. I'm really pleased to have Brett on the podcast today. Brett, great to have you along for this evening's episode.
Yeah, I'm excited. Really appreciate you inviting me on.
No problem. So Brett, you're CEO of Pupil Progress. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about Pupil Progress and what it is and what it's got to do with EdTech, really, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose straight off the bat, I don't really like the title CEO. I think it's quite a grandiose title for a company our size. I prefer founder because I'm really passionate about what we do. Is really deeply embedded in solving problems for teachers, for school leaders, for students. Really simply, it's been a bit of a whirlwind. So Pupil Progress exists for 10 years. I was a teacher. I taught for 12 years. I was actually in Bermondsey for just short of a decade. For those of you who don't know London very well, it's literally right in the middle. So by Tower Bridge, London Bridge area. Really fun time, really challenging context, but love the school and love the kids. What happened was it was a really high pressure context because academies at the time, it was right around that transition away from Challenge London and actually Pixel started right off the back of that. And that was something that really started to gain traction. And being a central London school that was particularly well funded, failure wasn't an option. And obviously that's the same in all education settings, but it was particularly, there was particularly ruthless on making sure students didn't underachieve. And it was just very high pressure to ensure that your students and your cohort that you were teaching, so as a former PE teacher, you met target. And you'd have, very, very rigorous data point, in business, we'd probably call them quarterly meetings, but they're effectively your quarter meetings, your data point meetings. And obviously you review your results at the end of the year. And what I found very difficult was being able, the amount of work and time it took me, two things actually, amount of time and work it took me to actually report and help the students understand where they were working at, where I, as a teacher, knew what grade they were working at. So I knew what to teach. And then me trying to then report that to the senior principals so that they've got confidence that they're going to meet their minimum targets. I mean, it's an inordinate amount of work. I don't want to get too deep into the psychology of certain tasks. If you are not that way inclined, it's a task that you will push down the list because they're psychologically uncomfortable tasks. Anyone that's got a psychologically uncomfortable task, if you don't get it done in the morning, it's not getting done in the afternoon. But this was so psychologically uncomfortable for me, getting on spreadsheets, trying to work out what grade there are. I don't know if you remember, Matt, UMS conversions. So it's even worse. Then you'd have a raw mark. You've got to convert to a raw mark converted from the grade boundaries, and then the grade boundaries were applied using the UMS. So you're trying to do that when you've got 4 units for a GCSE PE qualification was an absolute nightmare. So I used to beg my brother. I used to beg the maths leads. I'd go to the maths corridor and they would, Ben would look at me down the corridor and he would say, if you come anywhere near me asking me about spreadsheets, formulas, I'm going to chuck you out the window. So don't even walk down this corridor. And then I'd have to, bribe people with boxes of chocolates just to help them fix the spreadsheet, let alone set it up. So it was just one of those situations where I was actually, there's got to be a better way of doing this. If the exam boards are standardized and everything is done through a standardized process, if you're going to calculate the grade exactly the same way as you are for AQA English for GCSE, as you are, for the specification for history, EdXL A level, then if everyone delivering Edexcel, history, A-level has to calculate it that way, well, why isn't there a software doing that rather than everyone trying to find a spreadsheet to do it or trying to share a spreadsheet? Stupidest or cleverest thing I've ever done, still don't know, because I probably work harder than I ever did when I was a teacher, but I spent my life savings on paying a web developer to build the very first version of the platform, which effectively was called Track PE. I don't know if anyone's ever going to listen to this that ever remembered Track PE, but that was then something that tracked progress for GCSE, AQA, OCR, Edexcel, WJEC, and also then started tracking the BTEC. And then I was getting random phone calls, Matt, saying, my parents have seen the reports that the PE tracking system has produced and are now really upset that French don't have them and are upset that English don't have them. And then I was getting phone calls from vice principals saying that the vice principals are saying that the heads of department are frustrated that the school have invested all the, in a system that PE get these reports produced really easily, and we don't get them. And I was literally an assistant principal in what was called COLA, which is City London Academy. So I was having to say to them, look, I don't have this. And then I very fortuitously met my business mentor, who then was saying, is this replicable? And then I said, yeah, we could get this across other subject areas. And then all of a sudden we realized it was going to solve more than one problem, which is each individual department. But it's also now this really important piece we're doing, which is centralizing whole school and whole trust data in real time. I know it sounds like a bold statement, and I don't know if other founders are as bold as what I'm about to say, but it's the first time in history data for your tracking and monitoring, your attainment data, can be accessed by a trust director, a CEO in real time. There is no delay in a data point process, which is insane to think in 2025 that any leader of any area, whether it's a teacher leading their class or head of department leading their, can go, what grade are my students working at now? They've got to wait for a data point to understand. So that's what we do. We calculate the grade exactly as the exam boards do. We ensure really accurate data so that teachers understand exactly what grades the students are working at. They can share that with their students. But it also means the leaders in the school can have a really accurate handle on what grades the students are working at any point in the academic year.
So it sounds like you really saw a problem, experienced a problem firsthand, and then looked to a way that you could improve that situation for yourself primarily, and then share that with others. And now that's moved past just the PE subject into a whole curriculum across multiple different phases, and utilizing EdTech to solve that issue. So there's a few bits from that I really like to delve into with you to understand a bit more. I think the power of technology to make teachers' life a little bit easier in what is such a challenging role is a really interesting area, which we'll come back to. But I think the first of all is kind of like your experience from entering the market, trying to build a product specifically for EdTech, and perhaps how that you might not have anything else to compare it to, but perhaps how that got started, how you kind of like worked with people to turn that into reality. Because could other people see that vision that you had for it if they weren't in the industry, if they didn't understand what you were telling them? Or did you find that when you explained it to a lay person and said, well, this is the problem, this is the solution, this is how I'd like to deploy it, it came fairly easily?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the reason why it's a really great question is because there's so many levels to it. I think this journey has taught me you have to be so clear on what it is that you are not very good at, and understand where you have to drill into the things that you're really good at, and you have to let the people do the things that you're not so good at. So I'll explain what you mean. It sounds like a bit of a riddle to what you're asking, but what I've worked out over time, I'm actually really good at getting people excited about what we're doing. So when I actually talk to people, my superpower, if you will, is being able to relate to anyone. So if it's maybe an investor that's saying, "Look, help me understand it." Okay, well, actually, this is like zero. Remember when all of accountants were on spreadsheets, and then Zero came along and said, "You can do this far easier because the accounting process is pretty standardized. We're going to build a." So then someone goes, "Oh wow!" So the teachers are using spreadsheets to calculate the grades, which is effectively the money. Exactly that, right? So my skill was in really getting people I was able to get people to understand what the opportunity is. Now, in the education sector, the opportunity is massive because it's time, it's workload, it's stress. So when you really talk to the education sector about stress, time, workload, these are things that I felt. So the stress was, Brett, I've got to be honest, some of your results need improving. Otherwise, we've got a lot of people that would like your job, right? Now, that's not to say I agree or disagree with that, but that's just the way it was. And if you are not going to enable those students to be able to get to where they want to go, we're going to find someone who can. There's your stress, there's your worry, and then the workload to actually physically do that, on top of the fact that my brain doesn't really work that way. Ironically, I'm founder of a data company effectively, and I'm actually not very data literate, which is maybe why it's been so successful. It's because we've really simplified it. Okay. And that's the thing, is how we got it there was really getting people enthused about what this is really going to do. And then it's very difficult to get a software of this size off the ground without some form of funding, or getting either a grant, a government one grant, a investment from angels or venture capitalists, and being able to communicate the market opportunity in with your passion. That's how you get these things off the ground. And if you're someone who's really good at the coding and the data and being able to, you've got to get someone in who can communicate the way I can. But if you can't communicate the way I can, and you can't do what I can't do, which is the coding, the data. I mean, Barnaby he's a bit of a unicorn because he's particularly good at also speaking. Barnaby's our co-founder. He's particularly good at speaking. He was a former teacher, but he also is very good with data and spreadsheets and understands how to build a large data model and all the stuff that really I can't do. So I suppose, to bring that to a summary without trying to sound like too much waffle, is you've got to be able to bring in the people that can do the right bits of the business, and you've got to let them get on with it. Otherwise you won't go very quickly at all. Because someone said to me once, it's just the best analogy ever, is you literally can't experience what 15 years of experience that someone else has got without doing that for 15 years. So if you imagine, quite simply, it sounds like the most obvious statement in the world. If you try and do what someone's been doing for 15 years, you've lost 15 years. You lose 10 years trying to do that. You lose 20 years trying to do that. So you've got to let those people bring that experience. And my job is just to try and knit it all together, I suppose. Does that help to answer a question?
Yes, yes, it does. Yes, it does. So really interesting points to get underneath there and understand. Obviously, I think it's very true about IT people in general. You normally have you have the people who can talk and the people who can code, or the people who can do all the behind the scenes stuff. And it's very rare to get both of those melded together. And as you say, it's playing to the skills that you've got at a particular time to get there, and building that team around you, which is so important. And it sounds like between you and Barnaby, you've got both areas covered with a bit to spare as well. I'd like to delve in a bit, if we can. The products. You've taken this delve into this chance to develop the product and move away. People are interested in it, and it always inspires me when people decide to take that jump and to say now's the time to go from what potentially could be a side project or a hobby and into a full-time business. What was the real drive to do that from your experience being a teacher? Was it to help the other teachers? Was it to fix these problems? And is that still the same drive that you've got today?
Yeah, the truth is, I think I've always had an absolute obsession with problem solving. And my obsession with problem solving is there's got to be a way where someone can do this easier or more easily, and therefore it's of benefit to someone, including myself or the team or the people the other side of the system that you're doing the process for. So when I really reflected on my assistant principalship and my middle leadership, I was forever trying to solve a problem somewhere that made something a little bit easier. This one in particular saved all of my department hours of time. It really enabled me to feel in control. It really enabled me to feel much more enjoyment for my job because I felt more in control. I wasn't, oh my God, like that gut wrench. I never forget that the summer that I had used this system truly as its like first version of the software, I had absolutely no anxiety around the GCSE results. I'd even published the results to my vice principal to say, we will get best 84% meeting minimum targets. At worst, we'll get 72%. And that's all dependent on two students and whether they're going to get the grade boundaries are going to go in their favor. Now, thankfully, the grade boundaries did go in their favor, and we ended up getting that 84%. But he literally said to me, he says, "How are you so confident?" And I said, "Because I know exactly how many marks they need in order to achieve those. And if I put in different scenarios very quickly, I can see, well, if the grade boundaries don't change or go up, this is going to happen. If the grade boundaries change and go down, this is what's going to happen." So we knew what was going to happen really early in year 11, and we knew what was going to start to happen around the end of year 10, if I'm completely honest. So it really was something that if I could feel like this, I was just thinking to myself, wow, like surely every PE teacher can feel like this. Every PE teacher can get, I don't care what it was, whether it was to get home earlier, whether it's to do a bit more work and get it done and feel less stressed, whatever your thing was, whether it was to, mine was getting on the minibus. So I used to love getting on the minibus. It was like my driving the kids to a fixture. You got to know the kids so well. They were great kids. You just formed a real, brilliant teacher relationship because you were doing something for them and they enjoyed themselves. But the more and more I got into leadership, the less I could do the things that were enjoyable for me and for the kids. So I just thought to myself, like, if I can get this out so that more and more people can feel what I feel, that's got to be a good thing. And then that's carried me for a long time. But the thing that's really, you do have, you get into a groove, and your motivation to help is not necessarily always going to be there. So I'm not going to try and fool people like, I'm just as passionate as what I was, because you start a business, you get into work for business. But the thing that's really reinvigorated me is what happened with my daughter. So when she was doing her A-level, she's 18, she's 19 now. And she's now at Oxford Brookes. And her predicted grades were like EED. And I was talking to the teachers. I said, this is not right. So she actually used Pupil Progress to understand what marks she needed in what papers. She used Pupil Progress to understand what's possible, what I need to work on, look at the question level analysis, see the different questions that are the biggest impact questions, and how can I go and work on those and get reassessed. She ended up with ABB.
Wow.
And got into her dream university. So now I've got this whole new invigoration after all this time of you kind of get, I don't care what any founder says, you do get into a bit of a groove, and you're always going to have passion for it. But it's also now lit a fire under me because I felt the stress as a parent going to the teachers. What do you mean that's what she's working at? What do you mean? Oh, because they sat this one question and then she did this back in March. I said, there's 3 papers. When was the last time she sat a full paper? Oh, we've got, 3, she sat 3 questions and that was 3 months ago. And this is insane. And in the moment she actually got the information, she then became more motivated. She reduced her stress. I, as a parent, is going, oh, like, I'm now less stressed because my daughter's less stressed. And then we get those, magical tears on results day when she gets an ABB. I mean, how would you not want that in kids, students' hands, parents' hands, teachers. How would you not want that in someone else's hands?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always really powerful when you experience it yourself as a parent. I know I've said a few times on the podcast. I've got step kids and biological kids, and actually none live with me full time. So for me, getting them into a school where I can actually keep in touch with them through technology and keep up to date and see their progress, feel like I'm part of the everyday. Because I get a phone call off my daughter every day, and she always forgets stuff to tell me, or deliberately sometimes forgets to tell me stuff as well. And my eldest stepdaughter is doing the GCSEs as we speak, and you want to be there for them and you want to support them, and any app, any program, any solution which allows you to do that whilst doing your busy life and everything else you have to do is a huge benefit. And I get driven by it in terms of putting it into schools and seeing the difference that it can make. Unfortunately, none of my kids have gone to a school where I've actually done the IT. So it's only recently that I've got to see that firsthand when my daughter's school got Arbor, and I was able to connect really deeply with what she's doing, which kind of leads me on to a question that I have in terms of how you've experienced being a technology product in schools where we're sold a lot of solutions that are going to solve every problem that the school has ever had. Lots of platforms are out there, and not a lot of money to go around, and not a lot of time for people to engage and get the full out of any platform, either because they can't afford the training that need to go along with it, or they can't afford the time to spend to get the most out of it. How difficult is that for you in trying to establish the product in schools and to do it? Does it just speak for itself once you've got that time to show them it, or is it a real challenge for you, like we see in a lot of other ecosystems and products that are great products, but they're just, really, you've got to sit down and invest the time in them?
Yeah. Straight off of the bat from that question, once we speak to a school, it's a really high percentage of schools that want to move forward. It's like 1 in 4, 1 in 5 schools actually want to move forward because we're not reinventing the wheel. The problem is so palpable, it's difficult to ignore once you see the solution. So when you go, oh yeah, every teacher is using spreadsheets, and the accuracy of all of that process is so much of a nightmare that I'm only looking at the data that goes into the data point on my school's MIS. I actually haven't physically got the time to even go and look at where that is coming from because of my day to day. So when they actually see, so implementing your software allows us to quality assure every single department area is in line with the exam board specification calculations exactly, without having to do anything. Correct. Oh, and on top of that, at any point I can go in and really support teachers, really support middle leaders in understanding where do they need help? Which students do we need support with? Which time do we need to allocate in their intervention timetables? How can we strategically say to that teacher, okay, maybe not so much pressure with those students because I know that they've been taken out to go to science. All of those things are all problems that are trying to be solved. So when we get in front of teachers and vice principals and trust directors, there's always really a high level of interest because the problem's real. It is a challenge because there's no way that we can sit here and say that there's not budget constraints, that there is a lot of softwares that people are using. A lot of softwares, if I'm completely honest, that they're saying they do one thing and they don't. And they don't, we've had a lot of software say, we're a tracking and monitoring tool because it's quite a popular term at the moment. And actually, when you really dive into it, they're not. They're either an analytics tool or they're an assessment tool, which is fine. They're all needed. We need analytics, we need top level analytics, we need assessment, we need resources. But there's a lot of people that might potentially jump on a particular bandwagon, and then some schools get missold. I mean, some of the MISs are saying they track and monitor progress. Well, they don't, you know.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions, is that you've got these systems such as Arbor, Bromcom, Iris, and such like, and obviously Sims, and they're claiming to be a one-stop shop for all those solutions. So I guess my first question from a naivety point of view is, are they telling the truth? I'm going to guess your answer is probably not. And then what the key difference is between what you're providing and what they're providing. And as a subnote of that as well, is you mentioned how many systems schools have got. And I'm really interested to see from your point of view how that can be solvable moving forward. Is that something that's a concern of yours? Is it a risk? Is it something that impacts your planning and your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to be negative about other people's tools, because there's only very few tools that I've seen that are available that I'm like, what, are you serious? I don't even know how you exist as a business. Take Arbor, for example, first class MIS, really great MIS, brilliant at what it does. It's got good communication with parents. It's a really effective tool. I think it's been adopted now by, I don't know, something like 17,000 schools or something. It's a really good MIS, but that's what it does really well. And what I'm going to talk about is a point solution. So we're a point solution. And this is not a new term to some schools, but some schools might not have ever heard this term. Now, outside of education, it's been quite common language, probably for a good 4 or 5 years, which is you have a tool that does one thing really, really well, and what we would say really, really deeply. So that tool does that particularly well, and then it doesn't do much else so that it can do that one thing very, very well. I would say we're a really good example of a point solution. We do tracking and monitoring really, really well and really, really deeply. And we don't try to be big analytics, and we don't try to be an assessment tool. We don't try to be a resources tool. We don't try to be an MIS either. We let MISs be MISs. We let analytics tool be analytics tools. The way I believe that the market is going to go is that we are going to see a reduction in the systems trying to be a one-stop shop. It's not possible. I mean, it's a bold statement. It's not possible. The speed at which you've got to code, the size of the team, the technology debt you're building to try and do everything so deeply. The future is integration. And that's the word I want to bring in, is the future is actually an integrated approach whereby you do. I mean, I'll talk really complimentary about Applica. Applica are a great, point solution. Guthrie, I was actually talking to him the other day, founder of Applica. They do, admissions into sixth form, support the head of sixth form, deal with that. They support the parents, they support the students. That's a really first class example of a point solution, right? That's what we aim to be, and that's what we are right now, is something that wants to fit into an integrated solution for schools, whereby everyone's doing what they set out to do really, really well, and then integrating so that they all work really, really well together. And it's a strange thing, Matt, because I'm sure you're like us. You're just talking about, setting up your Mac. You turn on Google. Google's got a sidebar where HubSpot pops in. If you're not using HubSpot, you're using Salesforce. You're using Intercom that overlaps as your chat functionality. These things, you don't have to speak to a single person to make these things happen. Whereas in the education sector, it's a whole different story. You've got to go and log out of something to log into something else. And our passion is we want to make sure that we're really driving those integrations and making it super useful for schools so that we can carry on being really deep in the product that we create, so that they go, oh my God, this tracking and monitoring tool, it allows me to do everything. I can sort out the intervention groups. I can know exactly which students I need to work with. Reports are out to parents. I've got understanding of what I need to teach, what home learning I need to set. I might need to set that through Seneca. I might need to set that through Google. So that's my passion, and that kind of links into my passion about problem solving as well, because one of the problems that schools have got right now is they are being missold a few things. If I'm honest, they're being missold that that, that mark book is tracking and monitoring. Well,
Mm.
it's not. It's useful for a data manager to be able to organize the data, but that is not tracking and monitoring. That is not the ability for you to see the granular detail that breaks down the student's grade and performance so you can understand what it is you need to go and teach. That is reporting up. So just, I think it's important that we understand that as educationalists, and that the ed tech companies also, I think the businesses that are going to drill down into a really deep, really focused point solution, I think will win, is my opinion.
I think the that ties into how perhaps I fully agree. By the way, integration is the answer, and well
Mm,
planned integration, and where somebody's trying to do it all themselves, it doesn't give the best outcome. Another really good example of this is around safeguarding login. So platforms such as CPOMs, and what's My Concern, I think it's changed names now, but these platforms, they integrate with, with Smoothall, for example, the ability to push and Senso and others to push an alert through from the monitoring straight into those platforms is there. They then integrate with your MIS to record that and such like.
mm,
Those systems are the ones that we don't move schools away from,
mm,
because they are exactly what you described, a point system. They do what they do well, and actually they integrate with everything else that a school might have seamlessly, and
mm,
that's really, really powerful. I remember when I started as a network manager, we had Sims, people were saying, "No, I can do it all," and I was like, "But we're not using 70-80% of what it's doing there." And I was like, to get that, we need to. It can't be a jack of all trades. So we used it more as a database and used and built these bolt-ons. So there's things such as ePraise, and Ben Dunford was, just like yourself, was a teacher who moved into building ePraise at the time, and these other platforms that bolted on and did their specific bits well, and all reported back into that central system. So I think that's a really good thing to hear you talking about,
mm.
in terms of where you want your product to go. I guess the question is, are the big systems playing ball with that? Because we know that generally schools will adopt, Microsoft or Google, and then they'll choose their MIS, and then, as trusts are establishing, they'll look into odd packages around it. That means that for all of this to work and for your product to slot in, you've really got to have a relationship with all these different providers and systems so that the data can move through and be where the user wants it. Are you seeing that being an easy to achieve? Are you able to integrate so well with people? Are other products interested in it in the same way that you are, or are they quite closed off to it?
So it's a mixed bag, if I'm honest. We've got three things that are working against us in the education sector. Is you've got a relatively low amount of funding going into education, and I don't mean I mean at every level, right?
Yeah.
So from a school getting low funding to a district or a borough having really awful Wi-Fi connection because it's not the most up to date. So there's one element that's preventing technology moving forward in the way it should. And then you've also got the actual funding to the ed tech sector itself. So especially UK ed tech, you've got investors that are really, really interested, but aren't necessarily coming in at it like what we would potentially see in some of the other sectors, like out in either America. I mean, Texas has become a bit of a hotbed now for investment. Same with the old big languages like Silicon Valley. Because EdTech UK is quite a niche, the old school term is like cottage industry market. You people wouldn't understand to a certain extent how much money someone like maybe Airbnb or Uber raised to make these things happen, right? So it was like round two, they raised 40 million, when actually that's some of the exit prices of education technology. It's not the start point, it's the end point.
Yeah.
So if you think how fast you can move, if you're raising 400, 40 million, 140 million, 250 million, versus if you're raising 1 million, 2 million, or you're raising 500,000, or you're raising £250,000. So the thing is it's not necessarily frustrating. It just is what it is the sector itself doesn't move as fast as what I'd want it to get going, because it's you'd want to be able to ring up another EdTech provider and say, listen, of your 15 strong development team, can you just allocate a couple of those to build out the APIs so we can start talking to each other? But most EdTechs that you're talking to have got maybe a developer or two developers, and then they've got their own development schedules they've got to work with to then actually get the depth of the solution, because they've got maybe 30 or 40 different competing priorities of functionality. And I've spoken to a couple of education technology companies. It would be unbelievable for the education market for us to, but they're like, Brett, we can't get to this for 18 months, 2 years, because I've got too many products or too many, features that my current schools want. So it's not necessarily anything. I don't think the competition is new. I think the competition outside of education is just as insane, because it's technology, and there is always going to be this much depth of competition in technology. I think the thing that's not helping us is actually how little money is getting injected in to solve the problem, to make increase the value of what we're trying to experience. And I suppose from an MIS provider, I mean, you got to kind of respect the fact that every founder's going to have their own belief, right? And the people that have got some of those solutions that are claiming to be one-stop shops, and I don't want to name names, or those solutions will sit behind and believe that we should be driving one-stop shops and we should be saving school money, and we'll be sitting here and say, Brett, what do you think you're smoking if you think your product replaces what our module does? That's it just comes down to, at the end of it does come down to a bit of an opinion. My understanding is, and having had my experience with a lot of software solutions to run Pupil Progress, is there's always going to be a bit of overlap. There's always going to be someone that turns around and goes, Brett, actually, there's enough on that for us to not use you or stop using you. And then there's always going to be someone that goes, Brett, there's enough on yours for us to stop using that. But there will be a lot of integrations. I'm really confident in saying at some point in the future we'll be integrated with all the MISs, and there'll be some that say, well, we don't need it, Brett, because we've got that module. But then there'll be a large percentage of the UK market that just love the fact that the MIS speaks to Pupil Progress, and there's a huge percentage that just see the value in having something that's a bit monolith in some big school processes, but really targeted in other finite requirements. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and it's I can really understand and agree with what you're saying. And I think the key point there, it comes down to, is school's choice. If they don't want to use a module built into another thing, if they've found a solution like yourselves that really is that point piece on a single problem that they need solving, that's in their CEF, or something that they've identified as a weakness, and they need a solution for it, then they need to be able to use a piece of software that can talk freely to their other pieces of software and allow that data to be available as and when needed. Because the more data and context that you've got in any platform, whether it's the MIS or quickly being able to use it in Google classrooms or Microsoft Teams, have that access and that data more available to you, that context for you around students is also powerful for the growth of using tech in a school anyway. And we all know the more they use tech, the more they're going to need these solutions. And it's also you mentioned before around technical debt, and some schools are really struggling with the basics. That I have this conversation a lot with schools when we're talking about AI at the moment. And AI, don't get me wrong, it's going to be a game changer. It's going to be brilliant, but there's a long way to go. And if your devices can't get on the internet, if you don't have over 100 meg broadband, if you don't have any resilience in your connectivity, then AI is bloody pointless. It really isn't going to be the savior that everybody's talking about. And I think in our last podcast where I was talking with Carl, who's a data manager, you can clearly see how important AI is going to be in that sector to get that data and perform, deep data dives and pick out patterns and all sorts. I'm there with you. But teachers are still using Smart Notebook, right? Smart Notebook is a piece of software that's been around for many, many years. They're still using that. They won't move away from it. I'm migrating schools at the moment. They're paying stupid amounts of money to keep on using something which they've got the options that are in it in PowerPoint that they're already paying for elsewhere. They've got Sway, or they've got other tools within Google Workspace to do it. These schools are not at the point that some people think they are, and that really, I can't get that point across to enough people, is that we're so far away from where some people think we are in schools. And people will go, yeah, but this school and this trust has done that. Don't get me wrong, there's some really good pockets of exceptional use of technology, and they're very exciting and make a massive impact. But there's still 24 schools that are moving to the cloud in the next 8 weeks. These schools still don't even appreciate the ability to share a document effectively, to have it on the laptop in the home, at work, to be protected. And even if they do, they have to wait bloody ages for the download to come, and uploading, don't even get me started on it, because they can't do both at the same time because of those things. So on one hand, we're talking about the speed of which systems are developing and all cloud-based and they're all interlinking. But on the other hand, as you say, one of the problems is money, which ultimately is also impacting their ability to access systems like your own as well. I mean, if you're making a choice between spending money on software or giving somebody a laptop, or even, putting a roof over people's head that's not going to fall on top of them, you've got very limited choices, and it's really holding us back, isn't it? And I'm not sure people really appreciate how far it is holding us back. And a lot of these things that we talk about would love to happen aren't as common as what we might think.
I mean, I've got something. I mean, AI. I agree with you. It's going to do and is doing insane things. Insane, right? I went into a school recently, and they were talking about, at some point they would like, is what your roadmap for AI, Brett, and et cetera, et cetera. Have a guess how long it took me to turn the computer on to run the demonstration in the classroom, because I couldn't connect my computer. So we're a Mac-based business. I refuse to use anything else because they just work, right? I know they're more expensive, but we need to be able to serve our schools and not have any technical issues. So we use MacBooks. I couldn't connect to the internet because there was some whatever was in firewall and God knows what. So I said, don't worry, I'll use a classroom computer. We can all go in the classroom. It's great to present in there. Have a guess how long it took to turn the computer on?
I'd easily say 15-20 minutes.
Right. You're on the right ballpark, 11 minutes.
To
the point where the first 5 minutes was great because we had a bit of chit chat, and then 6 or 7 minutes was a little bit embarrassing, and then the last 3 minutes was like 4 days, because this is just like, and you're wondering why your behaviour is bad if a teacher's got to come from another classroom, because now the students stay in one classroom. If the teacher logs on, like, it was, honestly, I remember going in, even when I was teaching, I would go and turn my computer on and go and make a cup of tea, and by the time I'd come back, it was just about ready for me to get going.
Yeah.
So you have to go to your classroom first, and this is what we're still a decade away from people looking at what's being generated and created, and I'm like, I'm all for it. By the way, I'm not trying to go, yeah, it's never coming in. It's coming, but we've got some schools where last week I took the God knows how many number of calls I've taken like this with the Zoom on the camera, but I've got no microphone, so I'm going to put your phone on loudspeaker. So I'm going to send you my mobile phone number, and you're going to be on loudspeaker while I'm on your mobile phone. It's insane.
Sorry to interrupt the podcast, and we'll jump back in shortly, but I want to introduce the sponsors who make EdTech People possible. All are recognisable brands to anyone working in EdTech. Smoothall need no introduction to those working in schools, with 1 in 3 in the UK using their internet filtering, which provides real-time filtering wherever a user is and on any device. They also provide Smoothall Monitor, which is an essential safeguarding solution which allows monitoring of devices and captures for schools. You can find out more about Smoothall Filter and Smoothall Monitor and the other advice and support they've got available at smoothall.com. Next up, Secure Schools are an education-only cybersecurity team working to help schools understand the security within their schools and, crucially, provide support and training for those working within the school or trust. Recently, they have released their free Cyber School tool, allowing schools to assess their cybersecurity easily by answering key questions and getting a dashboard with all their results. Find out more by visiting their website at secureschools.com. First Pillar provide extensive support to schools in a wide range of areas. Their founder, Emma Gray, is an experienced school business leader who now works to support schools in all their operational needs, leaving them to focus on educating. You can see all the services that Emma offers at First Pillar and some great blog posts by visiting her website at firstpillar.co.uk.
Hello listeners of EdTech People, I'm Craig. When I worked in a school, I noticed how challenging it was for teachers to find and reserve shared spaces. That's why I created Classroom Bookings, an easy-to-use online room booking system. With Classroom Bookings, staff can reserve rooms at any time from anywhere. Designed for schools of all sizes, it supports multi-week timetables and flexible period times. Plus, the cloud service is priced at just £149 per year with no limit on the number of rooms or users. Try it free today or find out more at classroombookings.com.
Yeah, I was saying I've lost count the amount of phone calls I've had where you'll be taking the Zoom call and they've got no sound, and I'd have to ring them on their mobile phone and put their mobile phone on loudspeaker. That's like a regular thing. That's not like, oh, do you remember when? That's like a regular thing. It's got a bit better over these last few months, but because schools have finally realised you've got to buy a microphone. You've got to buy a computer that's got a camera.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to hook these things up. But yeah, it's AI is going to be absolutely definitive for our generation. But at the moment, we've got to lay the foundations to ensure that we can actually harness this promised land of AI, because even just the speed and the connectivity of broadband, just the simple stuff. There's a school that we that use us in central London, and they're just by Victoria, small little independent school, and they're right in one of these like kind of old school townhouses. And every one of the teachers uses a Mac. Everyone's got Chromecast. So you walk in any room, you just open the Mac, you click on room 42, and within about 3.5 seconds, whatever's on your Mac is on the screen.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is unreal. She's like, oh, Brett, just open your thing. Connectivity is automatic. And then you just go bump, bump, bump. Just Chromecast done. But that's where most, people come into Pupil Progress. As you open the laptop, they just get going. That's it.
Yeah.
But
same at Consero, and we reason why we're able to transform so many schools is that, I'll be honest, it's not that hard from a technology point of view to transform them. It is fast connectivity, reliable connectivity, both wired, wireless, broadband. It is putting in docs in classroom, giving them the right tools and the right kit to do it. And then there's the actual technical stuff that schools use in terms of software and stuff. The biggest problem is legacy software that slows it down and keeps it on there, and that inability, and in a lot of cases, actively not wanting to change. And Smart Notebook is a classic example of that. They're using this software from ages ago that they're not even using the latest version of it. And so a lot of that speed that you're talking about when they're trying to log on is connectivity through to a server, which they haven't invested in, but also trying to load so much software that's been so poorly coded and invested, and even when it has improved and updated, not fully adopted or not fully updated, and it causes that huge technical debt. And I actually wrote a blog post a couple of weeks ago around technical debt, and it really resonated with quite a few people. That a lot of people said that they read it and they could see it on there, and somebody was commenting on it just yesterday, and they were saying that it was down to the teachers not moving their skill set forward. And I turned around and said, I don't agree with that. I don't think it's a case of teachers not wanting to move their skill set forward. I think it's that, don't get me wrong, of course, there's some of those cases, but I actually think a lot of it is also down to not being able to move their skill set forward because they're not in an environment that allows that, pushes that as an option.
I'll also challenge that as well. That's lazy, because if you are any software you're developing now in 2025 or started developing it in 2021 or 2022 or whenever it was, you've got to get yourself in the psyche of who you're trying to sell to. And I've done it. I've been a teacher for 12 years. I've done 65-hour weeks. I've done 70-hour weeks. I've came home and not want to even talk to my daughter because I'm that exhausted, right? So you've got to make the software so intuitive that any brain space they've got left after doing the most important thing that they are paid to do, if they've got some capacity left and it requires deep thought, that's your fault as an EdTech provider. That's my view, right? Because you can do training but ultimately your software should be intuitive. You should have a button that says, if you want to do that, click this. If you want to do this, click this. Even me, as someone outside of education technology, I've got zero time from a software that needs to be trained. If someone said to me, Brett, this revolutionary software is going to do this to your bottom line, and it's going to save staff, and you're going to have to reduce the number of people you need to employ in the future. They sit down and go, right, there's an 8-hour training program. I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
If you're asking teachers to do that,
it's never going to happen.
You don't know your customer then, do you?
Well, I think that's a really good point to wind up on, is that it's people who have been in the classroom, have been in the coalface, have been dealing with the realities on the ground, and I know you've done that, and I've done that for many years. I always joke that it's only been in the last 3.5 years that I've actually left school, but I'm still in and out of them more than most people. And I don't think until you've experienced it that you can know what the actual challenges are. And it's one of the things I know, working, one of the reasons why I moved to Concero is that the founders have come from education. Is the reason why, yourself, the truly unique environment that it is. And it kind of leads on nicely as well to the last two questions that I always ask at the end of a podcast. And the first one being to tell me about something that you'd never like to see again in EdTech in education. So it could be a piece of software, hardware, or experience that you had that you're so glad or you hope you'll never have to do again. And I'm sure you got plenty as a PE teacher and assistant head in education. And then we always talk about the thing that you're most excited about and the next steps, in trying to achieve it. So what can you kind of give us an insight into what's a PE teacher's worst nightmare when it comes to technology, and that something that you would hope to never see again?
Oh, I mean, this is going to sound awful because I'm going to name and shame a particular software, but I don't believe it exists anymore. So
okay,
I'm going to take an awkward pun at it. But there was a software called Pars, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember it? I don't know. Is it still around?
It is still around. Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I mean, bear in mind this was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was probably even longer than that. And we tried to bring it in school. So it might have even been like 14, 15 years ago. Okay. The example wasn't necessarily that specific one. It was Pars, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just the fact that it was software brought in from another sector that just quite obviously tried to pivot and become something useful in education by a team of people that had nailed it in another sector and then gone, oh, education needs something like this. And then it was like, so, I don't know if anyone's going to listen to this and resonate, but I've just taught a 6-period day. It's Thursday. It's freezing cold outside, boiling hot in the main, what we would have as a dinner hall, but then you could pull the chairs out for assembly. And I'm sitting there, and the poor vice principal had been told that this is what we're buying. And she's like, click configure, then click like insert, then click, investigate. Then, and I'm like, I've done 6 periods, and I'm like, I can't keep my eyes open. I've got another 3 hours work. The coffee's not doing a job. And I'm just like, if you have to explain, like the words didn't marry, like on our platform, I'll give you an example. It will say tracking. So you click tracking, and it'll be like report. So you click report. It'll be like a blue plus button. You hover over and it will say add test. And just the softwares that existed when we were at school that just, it was so difficult to use without an instruction manual that it's no surprise today that they don't exist. The thing that I'm most excited about, I think being a really, really just grow, we work with nearly 700 schools now, and we've got really big plans on how this can be such an exciting point solution for tracking and monitoring. But I think the biggest thing I'm most excited about is really just connecting with all those other really complementary tools that make a teacher's job, a vice principal's job, a principal's job, an assistant principal's job. Just makes their job so easy. And then the last point, just the fact that the students get that all out at the end. They get a teacher that's got more time. They've got a teacher that's a little bit less stressed. They've got a teacher that loves their job a little bit more. And then they get the benefits because they, more students are getting, we just saw so many schools last year celebrating really outstanding results as a result of our software. And it was just such an amazing feeling. The team were just so overjoyed with, like, wow, like what we do on a day-to-day basis now moves that student onto the next A-level or college they want to go to, or next university. And when, like I said, the tears of joy I had when my daughter got into her dream university is like, you can't put a price on that.
No. So, and that is what it's all about at the end of the day, isn't it? It's giving those live chances from numerous different ways. If you make it easier for a teacher to do the work and they stay in the industry and they're able to make bigger impacts because you've just given them a little bit of headspace, you'll take that for a win.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Matt, by the way.
That's my pleasure, Brett. My pleasure. How can people get in contact with you if they want to find out a bit more about what you guys do and find out a bit more about Pupil Progress from here?
Yeah, I mean, find me on LinkedIn. I'm Brett Griffin, so founder. Easiest thing for you to do to know about what we do, pupilprogress.com. That's it, pupilprogress.com. You'll also see a load of videos and stuff on LinkedIn and on YouTube. It's as simple as that. I'll be on LinkedIn under Pupil Progress for sure.
Excellent. Great. Brett, it's been great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming along.
No worries. Thanks a lot, Matt. Much appreciated.